I remember a fantastic story about a philosophy teacher teaching his class about René Descartes. Now, for those of you who don't know who Descartes is, he was a philosopher who famously quoted, "I think, therefore I am." Basically, Descartes tried to prove that everything in the world existed using his empirical senses. But he soon came to the conclusion that you can't prove anything exists 100% because you're using your senses to prove it. And your senses are flawed. For example, your sight, touch, taste, smell can all be tricked into experiencing and seeing something that isn't actually there. So he came to the conclusion of "I think, therefore I am," because the only thing he could logically prove existed 100% was himself. Because in order to think, he must first exist. I think, therefore I am. And as the teacher was explaining this, the class didn't really understand, and there was one student at the back that interrupted and said, "Well, if I don't exist, well, then what's the meaning to my life? What's the purpose of me being here?" And the teacher said, "Well, I believe the meaning to life is to have a life full of meaning." The student still don't understand this. So he said, "Everything we put into our lives gives us meaning, gives us purpose. We create our own meaning and our own purpose." And again, the student didn't understand. So the next day, he came into school and he explained exactly what it was he meant. And he came in with a jar. And he said unto the class, "This jar here, this jar represents each and every one of you." He says it represents your lives. He says it has potential, but it's only in filling it do you give it meaning. And never truly in life are we filled to the top, even though we think we are. And so he proceeded to take some rocks. And he placed the rocks into the jar, one by one. And one on the floor for good measure. And he said to the class, "Would you agree with me, class, if I said this jar is relatively full to the top with the rocks?" And the class agreed, "Yes, it's relatively filled to the top with rocks, yes." He said, "Very well." And then he proceeded to take some pebbles. And he poured the pebbles into the jar. And the pebbles made their way around the rocks, right to the very top. And then he said to the class, "Would you agree with me now, class, if I said this has been filled to the very top for a second time?" And the class, dubious at first, agreed, "Yeah, it somehow has been filled for a second time to the top." He said, "Very good." And then finally he proceeded to take some water. Poured the water in, and the water made its way around the rocks and around the pebbles, right to the very top. And then he said to the class, "Would you agree with me, class, if I said this has been filled for a third time to the top?" And the class had logically and dubiously nodded that somehow something has been filled for a third time to the very top. At which point then he proceeded to wrap it up. And he said to the class, and he wrapped it in a nice little bundle, a nice little package. And he said unto the class, "This bundle, this package, represents each and every one of you." He says the rocks represent your family. They come before anything else in this equation. They take up the most space. Then we have your friends. They're the pebbles, and they represent everything that you are, and they represent your friends. They're important. They don't come before your family. And finally we have the water, and the water is everything that is you, working its way around all of that to make a nice little bundle, a nice little package that is you. And before we got a chance to finish, the student at the back interrupted and said, "Well, if Descartes was right, I can't prove anything exists, therefore I can't prove you exist, I can't even prove your metaphor exists." He said, "That's where I fear Descartes was wrong. I don't feel he should have said, 'I think, therefore I am,' because that's too certain. I feel he should have said, 'I think, therefore I am.' I think." Because, ladies and gentlemen, nothing in life is for certain. Not